All right, so let us get started. So that is our meeting flag. I guess as it is now in the recording, if you watch this recording, you get the meeting flag. So SIGPwny, I love my Wi-Fi. It should be at the top. So overview of wireless security. I'm going to skip a bunch of these things. Just know two things. Wireless security is really important. And also, I am not a lawyer. So that those are the two most important things. The two diagrams on the right are pretty important. The one right here, connected devices in billions, that is an estimate for where we're going. As you can see, it's still increasing exponentially. So we're having more devices. There's already more devices than there are people, and it's going to increase. It's estimated to increase by tenfold by the time we're it's 2030 or so. So, questions? Okay. So, in addition, the average cost of a data breach, specifically regarding wireless networking, is going way up, especially in America. So, let's talk about a story of Alice and Bob. So, Alice and Bob want to send each other some secret gossip, and Eve, an eavesdropper, wants to know that gossip. What can Eve do if they are on the network? Well, they can eavesdrop. They could send messages to Bob and Alice. They could stop messages from going to Bob and Alice. They could stop the entire network, or they could place themselves in between Alice and Bob, which is what's known as a man-in-the-middle attack, and that's the strongest attack. So those concepts apply within wire networking. It applies within all in all types of networking. But wireless networking, the second you cut that wire, it becomes a lot more interesting because there's some really unique vulnerabilities that exist exclusively within wireless networking. And it ends up making it a lot easier to perform attacks. So we need to cover three really important bases of network communication, and just security in general: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So these are the three most important principles that we want to ensure are true while we send data, or while we are encrypting things, or just while we operate on computers in general. So the first thing we want to talk about is confidentiality. So if a system has confidentiality, or if your messages have confidentiality, then only the recipients and the sender can decipher those messages. So as you can see, then the messages you send, star, blah, 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 blah. So the most well-known way around this is sniffing. So sniffing is the act of it's viewing packets through your network. Bad actors and hackers can sniff packets within almost all types of networks. The implications of sniffing are you can see data, you could see secrets such as passwords, and you could see material for other follow-up attacks. So the second big thing here is integrity. So data transmitted is correct and has not been modified intentionally or unintentionally. So within wireless networking, some examples of unintentional modification are bit flips or error byte streams. So with that, and that can be caused by a number of things. An intentional modification could be an off-path attacker attempting to send duplicate packets that are illegitimate, or a man-in-the-middle attack. There's also lots of other attacks that would fit into integrity that we'll talk about in a bit. It's the CIA model is kind of it's not a perfect model, but it's digestible, which is why we use it. So lastly is availability, and availability asks the question, are my services available, and can my data actually be transmitted from A to B? And this is really hard to stop. It's very difficult to prevent this. And the law is also yet to catch up to attacks on availability. So again, I am not a lawyer. So then the fourth little brainchild of the CIA model is not integrity. That's supposed to be authenticity. So authenticity is the data that's being transmitted genuine, and are both parties who they claim to be. And it's more of an extension of integrity, and the solutions to it also are the solutions to integrity. So it'll be lumped in with integrity. What did Victor? What did I say?
I think you might have said availability is really hard to. I don't remember. Can you just
Yeah.
clarify that?
So yes, it's really hard to prevent attacks on availability. So let's go back a slide. So it's really hard to prevent attacks on availability because of the fact that there's just not much you can do. If someone and I'll cover this later, but if someone floods your network, there's not much you can do. Any other questions? All right. So yeah, authenticity is the fourth brainchild of the CIA model, and it is examples of improving authenticity are just having strong passwords, having two-factor authentication, PIK, private identification keys, something like a zero-knowledge proof, which is proving that you know a piece of information without giving away any part of that information. That's pretty interesting. So what can go wrong? So node integrity is a big thing that is trying to be attacked. If you subvert one node within a network, and a node is just a computer or something that can receive and send information. So if you're able to subvert one node, you're actually able to access the entire network. Great example of this is my over the summer I pen tested the company that I was working for, and I was able to get into their entire internal network through a smart soda machine. All you need is really one node. And there's also human error that needs to be accounted for. So Mike will always click on free cruise tickets. Mike from accounting will always click on free cruise tickets on a Sunday night on his work laptop, and then bring it to the home network, the work network the next day. And a combination of those two things really is system misconfiguration. So if a system isn't misconfigured by human error, it can result in a full takeover. So in the example of the smart soda machine, the human error caused the system to be on the internal Wi-Fi instead of our guest isolated Wi-Fi. And because it was on the internal Wi-Fi, I was able to do things, the image hidden behind here, I was able to access the printer, and that was just a proof of concept. But if I could access the printer, I could also access something like the domain controller, which is the bigger threat, because the domain controller manages Active Directory on the entire internal network, and that's something you don't want exposed in any way. So the impact of this is roughly $14 million recently. The wireless networking specific vulnerabilities have cost upwards of $14 million. Yeah, it comes down to, once you can get in through the wireless network, you have data breaches, et cetera, et cetera. So there's really two security contexts. I'll speak about this briefly. For wireless, there's military wireless security and non-military wireless security, and each of those things has wildly different threat models and wildly different implementations. So military wireless networking it's able to operate under pretty physically strenuous conditions. So it has end-to-end encryption, jamming resilience, etc. It can operate under active adversaries pretty much at all times, and it adheres to a detailed security standard. Here's the there's like approved networking products for the U.S. military. There's also a wireless security standard that's like 27 pages long, and that's short for military stuff. For context, the how to make brownies is 23 pages long. So it's very highly secure, but it's also out of date, and it's starting to become less secure as time moves on. The reason it is out of date is because users technology continues to advance, and as technology becomes older, it's had more time to be researched. There's more time to do vulnerability research for it, and vulnerabilities start to pop up. It's also not perfect. So a great example of that is I think it was Fitbit wearable fitness devices exposed the location of a secret army base in Afghanistan because they were communicating to they were wirelessly communicating to, I think they had satellite or GPS in them, and they were communicating to a server, which then had a leak on it, and that leak exposed the location of a military base, which is pretty dangerous. So the other context here is non-military wireless networking. Non-military wireless networking does not legally or like by force have to adhere to any explicit security standards. And as a result, there's a large variety of vulnerabilities, especially in something like IoT, Internet of Things. No one is caring about um, security whatsoever, which is why you're seeing like people taking over like smart cameras and smart homes and like smart TVs and anything with the word smart in it, like your fridge. It's easily being taken over now. Smart lights, smart locks. You get the point. Um, and there's different types of wireless networking. There's star topology, which is pretty common. That's where you have a router and all the devices go to that router. And then there's peer-to-peer or ad hoc networking, which is a really cool form of networking where you can communicate between computers without ever needing an actual like wireless router or connection to the internet. So first big thing we're going to talk about is attacks on wireless confidentiality. So again, confidentiality is the fact that your messages are undecipherable and only the intended recipient can read them. So in all networks whatsoever, sniffing affects confidentiality. So wireless communications specifically travel through open space, which means a lot of things. So real quick, again, sniffing is just the act of reading packets without sniffing is reading packets that are not necessarily meant for you, or just reading all packets within your network. A great example of sniffing is the packet squirrel. And packet squirrel works on a wire network. You can buy it from Hack5 for $60. All you need to do is just plug it in to an Ethernet port on this network, and you have an instant backdoor. And you can actually, the funniest part about that is you can connect to it wirelessly. So that's wired communication. The problem with that is you need physical access. You need to like walk into the building and put the packet scroll somewhere, and someone could still remove it. With wireless access, it's not that at all. You don't necessarily need authentication. You don't need network connectivity, and you don't even need physical access to the building. The reason for that is wireless networking, by definition, is broadcast. When you send out a message, you're sending it out omnidirectionally. It's going everywhere. And that data can be intercepted by anyone. So if I need to send a packet this way and I broadcast it, it's going everywhere. So if someone's over here, I'm moving my hands, and if someone's over here, they can still read that message, which means sniffing is extremely easy on wireless. So great example of like sniffing and the implications of this. So I grabbed a screenshot of just some random Wi-Fi. We have Clancy, just someone's Wi-Fi, direct BB. So we've got devices that are giving off a Wi-Fi signal. And the implication behind this is that if you can see the SSIDs, the Wi-Fi names of all of these places, you're getting packets from them. You're receiving packets from them. And if you can receive identification packets, you can probably receive other packets just meant for normal things. So the range and decipherability of like sniffing itself is solely dependent on network configuration and where you are. So if there's a lot of noise, it's going to be a lot harder to sniff specific things than if you're in the middle of nowhere and there's just one packet stream going back and forth. It works with Bluetooth, thermal communication, VLC, which is visual light communication, acoustic, pretty much almost all forms of networking communication. There is a way to sniff it. So, for example, with there was thermal is a form of communication. It's very, very cool, and it's currently being researched. So the how to sniff thermal is basically have a very, very sensitive like thermal vision or thermal sensor and just look at small changes in temperature. Great example of how you can look at all this stuff is monitor mode. Monitor mode is compatible with many network interface cards, which is what NIC stands for. And these network interface cards are able to just see every single packet that hits it. So it doesn't necessarily matter if it's meant for you or if it's even meant for your network at all. So I could be on a line iNet, right? And someone else could have their own little network. And if my network interface card was on monitor mode or promiscuous mode, depending on what like app you're using, I could see every single packet. So what that implies is if someone is sending a communication from A to B and it's wireless, I can see that. If it's not encrypted and someone sends a password, I can see that password. I now have that password. Even if it is encrypted, that just comes down to how strong is the encryption. So then some common tools that are used for this are TCP dump and Wireshark. So war driving is sniffing to the absolute extreme. You can, with war driving, you take a car full of antennas and laptops and just various sensors, and you just drive around picking up signals. A lot of people do this as a hobby to create data sets of like Wi-Fi strength and like configuration. And that's not necessarily a hostile thing, but if you have a giant data set of how things are connected, how things are configured, there's probably going to be something that's using an old, outdated configuration that you could use to exploit. So malicious war driving, you can find the weakest access point within a neighborhood or a city, and you could sniff packets there and use it to find some vulnerability into that weakest access point. And then from there, you can take over the network. And then once you've taken over a network, you can do all sorts of things. You could turn it into a botnet. You could use privilege escalation to get into a stronger network. Yeah, it's great site. It was kind of a funny offshoot of this is War Carding by MIT. Where they took all of the materials necessary for a war driving car and they put it into a shopping cart. So you could drop USB drives, you had a PA speaker for announcements and intimidating music, and tons of antennas to eavesdrop on everything. And then the other thing is an actual war driving car that has, it's built for 5 gigahertz war driving. Google actually got in a ton of trouble. Their Street View cars, while they were taking photos, were also gathering configuration information by sniffing packets that were going by, which is just classic war driving. And there was a massive lawsuit that happened there because people started abusing those data sets. So here's a Wi-Fi sniffer. It's you could, if you wanted, you could buy an 802.11ac Wi-Fi sniffer for $399, or you can make one on your own for $15. So don't buy one. Get one yourself. Get a Raspberry Pi. Build your own Wi-Fi sniffer. That's it's a cool thing to do. Difference between this and a regular USB Wi-Fi NIC? No idea. I googled Wi-Fi sniffer, and I wanted to see what kind of ripoff they were doing. And yeah, you want to buy a fancy Wi-Fi sniffer? It's $400. Don't do this. Do not buy this. So there's a lot of different countermeasures to packet sniffing. One big one is requiring authentication. So you can't see the packets unless you're authenticated. The issue with that is it doesn't matter because the packets are still in open air. So if bad actors are in monitor mode where you can see every single packet, they can still be sniffed. Same thing with hiding your SSID. Again, that doesn't make a difference. And a matter of fact, it provides a false sense of security. All that will stop from is like hiding just people who are lazy and just want free Wi-Fi from signing onto your Wi-Fi. The issue is the packets are still in open air, so they can be sniffed. And on top of that, many frames that are not like SSID identification frames contain information about the SSID. So like if your SSID was called like FBI surveillance fan and you turned on hide your SSID and someone was sniffing, they could still like do a DNS request or a DHCP request and it would respond with the SSID. So bad actors can send out requests to find hidden networks. So another solution would be send packets directionally. And what that basically means is like have an antenna right there, like the simple Wi-Fi ultra long range extender that I've got there. Those can go up to 12 kilometers sometimes, which is honestly crazy. The issue with that is directionality has a cone of dispersion for how far that signal is going to go and how far that signal will be decipherable, which means you can read from that cone. So if I set up a walk-fi, which is basically, thank you, Victor, for showing that to me. If you can set up, like, you can go buy a wok from a cooking store and then put in a Wi-Fi receiver within that wok, you can set up a long-range directional receiver, or you can just buy like an extender and you can receive data from this in decent conditions with like reasonable line of sight. That's 3 to 5 kilometers, and with a 7-kilometer with a 7-degree cone at 4 kilometers, you could be 200 meters away from the actual intended target and still receive the message. And that doesn't even account for the fact that you could be closer to the original sender. You could be at the same distance as the receiver and just 200 meters away and still receive the same packets. So not a lot of that works. So we end up at the big solution for confidentiality, which is encryption. So encryption solutions for confidentiality attacks. There's two main types of encryption: symmetric key encryption, which we're going to cover AES, and there's asymmetric key encryption, and the big one that we're going to cover is RSA. So there's other networking specific solutions: TKIP, EAP, SAE, 802.11x, which is EAP, and those are a lot of them are actually proven insecure, but we're gonna we're going to cover some of the more well-known forms of encryption because they also apply with wireless networking. Before I move on, does anyone have any questions? All right. Otherwise, we are going to move on. So AES is a 256-bit. The standard is currently 256 bits. It stands for Advanced Encryption Standard, and how it works is it's block-based encryption. You encrypt a block of data, and then use that encrypted block to encrypt the next block of data. So here's a small example. You've got your input text. I'm going to turn on my pointer. You've got your input text. The agile white cat jumps over the sleeping dog, and you encrypt it, and it becomes garbage. And then you decrypt it with the same key, and the agile white cat again jumps over the sleeping dog. So it's symmetric key encryption, which means it uses the same key for encryption and decryption. It's also extremely fast. You can do one with a decent computer. You can do 1 gigabyte in 0.6 seconds. So it's pretty fast. There's also it's pretty secure. It's very secure. It's the current standard, but there are some known vulnerabilities, such as the known plain text attack. So if you know what is being sent, and you know the plain text, and you also know the encrypted text or the cipher text, you can gather some information such as like initial values, intermediate values, secret keys. You can yeah. So there's lots of information you can gather from a known plain text attack. There's a few other attacks. I don't have time to go into them. But just know that AES is significantly more secure than just plain text data. Next thing is the fact that networking, and especially wireless, makes sharing a secret complicated. Because if we need to have the same piece of information, but we're two different hosts far away from each other, how are we going to communicate that? If I sent it and someone received it, then they just have the same key, so they can decrypt messages, which is it's just the same thing as sending in plain text. So you have to generate the shared key somehow. Here is the AES process. No one needs to know this. No one needs to learn this ever. Just use a library for AES if you're ever going to use it. Please do not write your own AES. Just don't. It already exists. I mean, you subtract bytes, you shift rows, you do stuff. I don't know. So I'm gonna where's Diffie-Hellman? There it is. So real quick, we're gonna cover Diffie-Hellman, which is the way to share a secret key. And how that works is so the great, I'm not going to go into the details. It uses what's called finite set group theory. But take this paint example. So Alice and Bob have a common color, and we both, Alice and Bob both add secret colors to it. So now red, yellow plus red is orange, yellow plus blue is green. Then they send these things, they send these mixtures over the network, and those mixtures can't be easily separated. You can't separate paint. And then you add your secret colors again, and you actually end up with the same weird brown color. So that's the general concept of how you can have so this conversation could be completely public and in the presence of an attacker, and you could both end up with the same private key without the attacker ever knowing how they could what that private key is. Yeah, Diffie-Hellman is really, really cool. And this is kind of how Diffie-Hellman itself works. You agree on two numbers, you randomly generate a private key, you calculate the public key, you send the public key, and then you calculate the shared secret. So the other form is asymmetric key encryption, which means you have two different keys. You have one for sending and one for like encrypting, and you have one for decrypting, and that's your RSA private key and your RSA public key. So RSA was created by Ron Rivest, Adi Shamir, and Leonard Adleman, which is why it's RSA. So there's two keys, and it's way slower, way slower. So you need to use it for small amounts of data. And it's significantly harder than AES to brute force, as it's 2048-bit. So the concept behind RSA is you have really large prime numbers. So great example here is 23 times 11 is 253. That takes you a few seconds to figure out in your head. But what are 253's factors? It's 23 and 11. That we can do that because I just told you. But if you didn't know that, it might take you way longer to figure out the factors of 253 than it would to just multiply those two together. The same property applies for computers. What this is it's a one-way operation. It's something that's really easy to do in one direction, but almost impossible to do in the other direction without like an infinite amount of time. So if you want to take a look at RSA keys, just type in SSH keygen and send it to a dummy file. Otherwise, it will overwrite your SSH key, and you don't want that. All right, so the next thing we're moving on to, this is a lot of words, is just general network integrity attacks. So integrity, again, assures that your data is not tampered with and it's from the correct person. So a big attack here is an off-path attacker. An off-path attacker, it's a pretty common attack form where you are able to see packets and you're able to send packets, but you aren't necessarily in between the two people. So you can't stop packets from going between A and B. But what you can do with that is you can send packets pretending to be A or B. So if a great example of this would be a way to actually establish a man-in-the-middle connection as an off-path attacker, where A sends out what's called an ARP request, which is an address resolution protocol request, asking, hey, who has IP 1.2.3.4? And the off-path attacker sees that and replies, hi, I have IP 1.2.3.4, and I am this person. So then that gets A or B, whichever one send out that request in the first place, will start using the attacker as it's the who they believe B is, or A, respectively. And what you have established there is a man-in-the-middle attack, which is essentially putting yourself between Alice and Bob, or A and B, or the two hosts. And what you can do with that is do whatever you want. There's so many. You can drop packets. You can send people to false pages. You can sniff credentials. Really anything. So a well-known integrity attack is a replay attack. which so say Alice sends a key to her router. All you need to do for a replay attack is just send the same key. If you're an off-path attacker, I got a question here. If you're an off-path attacker, it might cause you both. How bad of a problem is this? That is a bad problem. ARP doesn't. So ARP is very insecure, and it's a really important thing too. ARP doesn't care. It just if whoever it's first come first serve, it's gonna ignore it. So if I reply, hey, I am 1.2.3.4 and my MAC address is this, it's going to say okay, and it's going to cache that for a bit. And any other things, it's going to detect as just moot. Doesn't matter. Way around that is having static ARP addresses, but even then, you could do a nearness attack or an evil twin attack, and I'll explain that in a minute. So Alice sends a key to the router. You can just use the same key. That joke just got ruined because I forgot to share audio, but it was the song Replay. So anyway, wireless integrity. So a big attack here is the Karma attack, and the Karma attack is an extension. It's an extension of the evil twin attack. And how the evil twin attack works is you set up an access point that is it has the exact same configuration as your intended access point, except it's bad, it's evil, which is why it's called evil twin. From there, you can do that. From there, what you can do with that is you can establish a man-in-the-middle connection, where you connect to the actual intended server or router or computer or anything, and the client goes through you, which is again you've established the man in the middle attack. So an example of this for cellular is a rogue Femtocell. So Femtocell it's something that will connect your phone or your computer to a cellular network, and if you have a malicious Femtocell, you can someone can send out a cell request, and someone can just the Femtocell can say, "Yep, that's me. I'm your 3G connection, or I'm your 4G or 5G connection. Connect through me," and they'll just connect through you. And there's authentication now, but at a time, or if you're able to bypass that authentication, you can just have people's cell traffic go directly through your device. And this was there's a great example of this is in Mr. Robot Season 2. I'm not going to play the clip, but it's a interesting clip. Another great example of just like attacks similar to the evil twin attack is a Wi-Fi Pineapple. So this is a device again by Hack5 that can it'll just put out 100 fake Wi-Fis, and those fake Wi-Fis will all be log on. You can log on to them, and you can send data to them, and you can access the internet with them. And how it works is the Wi-Fi Pineapple logs on to an authentic internet, and it just routes all of those fake internets through itself to the real internet. And it's just a man-in-the-middle attack. You can see every packet going through. You can stop packets. You can send packets. You have full control. Another integrity attack is a de-authentication attack. This is also a little bit of an availability attack. And how that works is you can just boot you can use various methods to boot users off whatever Wi-Fi they're using. And you can kind of follow that up with like a Karma attack or an evil twin attack. So then again, replay attacks are made really easy from by wireless sniffing, because you can just see any keys or any hashes that are going through, and you can try those hashes, and you don't have to be on the site. You don't have to have access to the network already. So then there's a bunch of protocols that exist. They're old, and pretty much every single one of them is insecure, including the one that we're using right now. So there's WEP, WPA, WPA2, and WPA3, which is, as we know, secure, and it's currently being implemented this year. So here's a big chart of all the current encryption standards. Not that you need to know any of this. But AirCrack is the way to crack pretty much all of these things. So it's an all-in-one key cracking program. Many of these protocols are built up upon what's called RC4 encryption, which is provably insecure. So the crack time for these things, WEP, you can crack any WEP network in a few minutes. And WPA, the original WPA, was built upon WEP, so at this point, it's just as fast. WPA2 has a 4-way handshake, which uses a more complex hash, so it can be cracked in as little as around 10 minutes, but on average, it'll take a few days to crack it. And that's scary because this is what most of us use right now. Most of us are using WPA2. So I mean, that's a scary thought. So what can you do if you are a man in the middle? So here's Chase Banking website, and it's obviously fake because there's a Russian domain here. But what if you had a man in the middle and you were able to change the DNS request so that it just said chaseonline.com? You might type in your username and password there, and it might just go take those credentials that you just sent to that fake website and try it on the actual Chase website to try and log you in. It may even fake 2-factor authentication, so you get past that. And I mean, from there, I mean, that's your bank account. From there, you're toast. So there's some countermeasures to integrity attacks as well. There's proper authentication procedures, WPA3, personal identification keys. You can make it harder for the attacker. One really annoying way to do that, don't do this, please don't, is to just spray out lots of fake Wi-Fi access points. And also use more complex codes, passwords on your Wi-Fi. Just make it harder to crack. Also use a stronger version of 802.11i, which is the security version of wireless communication, and also encrypt your data. So the well-known Wi-Fi version of this was TKIP, Temporary Key Integrity Protocol. It was wrapped around WP, and it's currently insecure. I need to find a better reference for some good Wi-Fi specific integrity checks. And then another thing is a message authentication code, which is basically the MD5 of the message that you sent, or some hash of the message that you sent. So you can run that hash again on the message that was received and see if it's legitimate. The issue with a message authentication code is you could just, if you're able to like crack the encryption on the message, you could just change the new message and then just write a new message authentication code. So there's lots of ways around this that we don't have time to get into. So attacks on availability. Isn't that just the worst clip art you've ever seen ever? That's I hated that when I saw it, so I knew it had to go into the presentation. So a DOS is everyone's heard of it. It's a denial of service. There's lots of ways to do it. You can send out garbage packets, like you can do a SYN flood, where you just send out SYN packets, which is a synchronizing packets without any like don't ever send back anything else. And you can flood the entire network. You can also do an ACK storm. Pretty much any. You can send out just any number of the same packet or some variety of packets from different locations will just bring a network to its knees. Fun fact, you can also turn on a microwave because microwaves are able to interfere with Wi-Fi. So if you turn on a strong enough microwave, you'll just stop the Wi-Fi from working. Another thing to do is you can just do a frequency blast. So you can just like send out the same frequency in all directions. So like if I want to stop 2.4 gigahertz, why don't I just emit a 2.4 gigahertz frequency constantly on my network? Everything is indecipherable. And then lastly, you can just tell people your website has a PS5 for sale and just DOS it immediately. That's a joke. So another thing you can do is a de-authentication attack. You can force people off the network, and that can be used to follow up for a man-in-the-middle attack. And then a famous application of the denial of service is the Mitnick Attack, which was an application of the DDoS where Kevin Mitnick, a very famous, well, infamous hacker, attacked a server so that this specific device could not. Was it slow? Oh yeah, slow Loris. So that a device could not connect and send requests to this server to confirm authentication. So it just let people in anyway. And Kevin Mitnick was able to use this to gain root access to some server. I don't know what his goals were. And he was able to gain root access. So solutions to availability, there really aren't any. I guess use illegal bandwidths that are not allocated for personal Wi-Fi use. This is where the law really hasn't caught up. There's no good answer to this. There's no right way to answer this because there is no legal precedent for this stuff. This is all in terms of law. This is all very new. Murder law has existed for hundreds of years, but wireless jamming law and denial of service law barely exists. Also, don't do any of these attacks that I've mentioned on other people. It's a crime. So like, don't DDoS people. It's a crime. Also remember the human. So wireless technical solutions only go so far. Human error and gullibility will always be the weakest link. Work in IT for 6 months and you will know that. Human error is always the weakest link. Great way to get around that, train people. Teach employees and partners about social engineering, phishing awareness, general security measures. Also, some more common sense security measures. Enable 2FA, enforce HTTPS, which is secure HTTP connections. Ad block, script block, only connect to things that you trust. Update to your latest security standards. WPA3, if you can get a chip that supports WPA3 or a router that supports WPA3, do it. And have an appropriate threat model. You're probably not going to be able to protect yourself from state-sponsored attackers, but you probably will be able to protect yourself from like some script kiddie using low orbit ion cannon, which did take out an elementary school, or no, it was a middle school recently. That's not a joke. It's in the news if someone wants to Google it. I think it was it was a high school. A 17-year-old took out a high school with low orbit ion cannon, which is like the most basic DDoS tool. And the biggest thing, thank you, Nathan, or Ravi, if you can take away one thing from this entire talk, never connect to an open Wi-Fi. Ever connect to an open Wi-Fi. Not even if you use HTTPS. Just never connect to an open Wi-Fi. That's worse, Victor. And then there's my sources. I also have a spreadsheet of sources that's 3 times bigger than this. So yeah, that's an overview of wireless networking. It's not the super technical solutions. It's not the super technical explanations. Does anyone have any questions about anything that I just presented on? Feel free to speak up or drop it in chat. How do VPNs fit into the picture? So a VPN is, so for those who don't know, VPN is a virtual private network, and it is a way to trick, the network that you are on, that you are somewhere else, and that you are on someone else's local network. And VPNs, so if you ever watch Tom Scott's video on, this message has been brought to you by blank VPN. VPNs only go so far. It'll be able to protect you from certain things, but it's not gonna, like, you're not invincible. Still be careful. Still exercise caution. And also a large part of that answer is I'm not 100% sure, Nathan. And that's valuable for me to know, and I should definitely research that. You should research that. We should all research that. Do you know if you can do a de-auth attack on WPA2 PSK without knowing the PSK? Oh, I was just reading about this. I mean, there's lots of ways. I mean, you could just DOS the user directly to de-auth them. You could send them specific. Yeah, apparently it depends on if it's patched. I mean, also if you can get the PSK, then it doesn't matter. But de-auth packets usually don't use encryption. So, any other questions? Feel free to speak up now. All right. That was wireless security. Sorry we did not have challenges, and sorry that this went for 50 minutes. Jesus.